Good day to you, loved one. It's time for another vlog, and I welcome you to join together and let's think on things and let's ponder from God's Word. We will continue this vlog with the title God's Structure of Salvation, and we left with this slide the last vlog, so we will continue with this one. We already went through it, of course, so let's continue. So if you have here this saying, God conceived, designed and made everything in the universe. So let's think about that statement. Conceived, designed and created by God. So what are we talking about here? For instance, knowledge and the understanding for use of materials. That's given by God, of course. Every knowledge. Also the laws of nature by which there is a certain order and structure in the observable world. Of course, that's also designed and created by God. And also spiritual laws, so the ones that are invisible, but they are also structured and they always work according to a certain system, just like the natural laws. The difference is that the natural laws are derived from spiritual laws, also called universal laws. And these are not to be underestimated because these laws are so important in life that through the millennia, proverbs and sayings have been derived from these laws because they always work. They are always the same and they always work the same way. For instance, one is everything starts with oneself, and that's of course a relative one, but it's still true nevertheless. So what does it mean? For instance, you will recognize when I say, I cannot love someone else if I don't first love myself. So if I want to love someone else, I need to love me first. It applies to every individual, of course. Also, it applies to respect, as an example, but it also applies to what I already mentioned in the first vlog, leadership. If you want to lead others, you need to be leading yourself first successfully. So, as you can see, it's quite important to understand laws. This is just one law we're talking about. A second one is, for instance, what you give attention to grows. And that applies for both the physical or the natural world, like plants. If you are genuinely attentive to the plants, you give them love, you look at them and you radiate positive energies toward them, they will blossom, they will grow. And it also applies to things that are invisible, like for instance, if you study and you focus on a certain area of study, then you will become better in that, so you will grow in that area, as an example. And so you have a lot of examples. Universal laws always work, and it is important to understand them, of course, in light of God's Word. That is the foundation of everything. Let's continue. Every living being, according to certain working values, are also conceived, designed and created by God, of course. And these are definitely working values that always work as well, and in a certain structure. Also, any type of creature with predetermined specific characteristics, whether it be plants or animals or human beings or other beings, all have their predetermined specific characteristics, and they are conceived, designed, and created by the God, the living God. And the last one, the right amount of knowledge, power, will, faith, evil, creativity, etc., is all conceived, designed, and created by God per creature, per moment or era. So I would advise to think on that, because that will increase your image of God. And in terms of image of God, we will go through that in this series more deeply, because it's important to always grow and study and better understand who God really is, and that will increase your realization of God. So let's read a very important and very well-known passage in Acts 17, verse 24-25. And that's so important to see and understand. Let's read. The God who makes the world and all that is in it, He, the Lord inherent of heaven and earth, is not dwelling in temples made by hands, neither is He attended by human hands as if requiring anything, since He Himself gives to all what? Life and breath, and, just to be sure, all. So this is from God's perspective. So from the creature's perspective, you have 28, verse 28, which says, for in Him we are living and moving and, just to be sure, are, meaning everything. We just are in Him. We exist in Him. Everything exists in Him. That's the whole thing. As some poets of yours also have declared, for of that race also are we. So Paul is alluding to the poets there and the philosophers there on the Areopagus, where he uttered these words. So very important again. Let's continue. God has a purpose with creation. Of course, I would say. This purpose is driven by love. Of course, I would say, because love is God's essence. And His omnipotence, He uses to accomplish His purpose with creation. So in short, you could say, God's might, God's power or omnipotence serves His love, is subservient to His love. Important to see that ratio, so to speak. So, are there objections? Oh yeah. There are always objections, and especially from Christians. Because what will they say? For instance, yes, but, and you know that everything before but is then nullified. But let's continue. They say, yes, but God is also just or righteous. Because of that, bad people will get their due. Or they say, yes, but God is also holy. Because of that, He cannot stand sin and will get rid of bad people via A, annihilation or destruction, or B, eternal torment in fire. That's what they will say quite often and regularly as an objection. So my question then will be this one. Is God, your God, please, a schizophrenic? A schizophrenic? In other words, does God have attributes in himself that are contradictory to his love and omnipotence? Of course not. My God is not a schizo, and I hope your God is neither. So, what is the situation? God's justice is precisely an affirmation of his love. It complements his love, so to speak. Not that his love is not complete, but it affirms, let me just mention that same word, it affirms his love. And his holiness is exactly an extension, or you could say an affirmation as well, of his omnipotence. He is holy because he is apart, he is unique. And that is what the term the living God talks about. So there's another word that is used, but we will use it to make a little turn to a sideway. How about God's wisdom? God's incomprehensible greatness has just been expressed with our feeble human efforts and words. However, when we talk about God's wisdom, there comes an apparent twist in this description. So it's also good to think together about that twist. We will go to that shortly. So we know by now that God has a brilliant purpose for his creation. Hope you believe it. And his purpose is driven by his all-encompassing love. So, how can God's purpose be defined then? It's quite simple, I would say. It's a relationship between God and his entire creation based on mutual, unconditional love. I repeat, mutual, unconditional love. That is the basis of that relationship that God is working towards. And in order to realize his purpose, God has defined a genial plan of action. So let's go into that. So just to put things into perspective, God himself is the creator. In that plan, it's like a story with roles. He is the creator, designer, the writer, and the director of this plan. Every creature has a role in God's plan. Every creature. At the end of his plan, when everything is accomplished, everyone has fulfilled their role. And everything also, not everyone only, but also everything has fulfilled its role. The main role is played by Jesus, the Christ, the only begotten Son of God. The opposing role, so to speak, the opponent or the adversary, is played by Satan as the adversary, or opponent, adversary. And you can also call him devil, meaning the true caster, or the one bringing confusion, or the one that is always, I cannot find the English word, he is always acting as a, like a general attorney, an attorney. I don't know if that's the right word, but the one that is always pointing at creatures toward God, so to speak, pointing out weak spots, etc. So what is then within God's great plan the most important and fundamental element? What is that? That is, of course, contrast. Contrast in the broadest sense of the expression. So God accomplishes his purpose with all of creation through contrast. Only way is that in order for God's love to ultimately be recognized, to be acknowledged, to be appreciated, to be thanked for, and of course to be returned gratuitously as well, like a mutual, unconditional relationship. So let's go now. Well, we still have some time. Let's go now to some characteristics that God has given to man, and let's ponder on them. God is a genius, I can tell you that. So some characteristics that God has given to man seem contradictory to God's purpose with man. I don't know if you already noticed that out of yourself. Maybe yes, maybe no. But let's go through some of them. For instance, every man or woman, every human being has a consciousness of God within us. Like there is a higher power than ourselves outside of us. Like an external power that gives us the kind of urge to want to idolize something outside of us. Do you recognize that? Okay, let's go to the second one. Every human being has an innate desire for a happy ending. If you read a book or watch a movie, you always, in the back of your mind, somehow are longing for a happy ending. Why? Of course, because God's plan also has a happy ending with all of creation. That's logical, right? So it's like an unconscious desire, so to speak. It's put there by God inside every human being. The third one, every human being has the tendency to violate commandments or prohibitions. So precisely that which is not allowed, that becomes attractive. Recognize? And children, and especially the small children, are still very honest, right? So if you would ask a 3-year-old to this, for instance, you put 3 boxes of candy on the table, a green one, a yellow one, and a red one, and then you tell that kid you can eat from the green and the red one, but the middle yellow one, you're not allowed to eat from that one. What do you think that will happen when you leave? Just leave for a moment. Of course, the red one and the green one are not interesting anymore. Only the yellow one becomes interesting. That kid wants to know what is in the yellow one. Right? Very recognizable, I hope. So I mention this because I, of course, refer a little bit to what happened in the Garden of Eden. Remember what God said to Adam and Eve? You can eat from all the trees over here. However, from this specific tree, you're not allowed to eat. And that same God that put this tendency in human beings, that same God gave this commandment to Adam and Eve. Do you think that God is crazy? Of course not. So what would be the hidden purpose of this commandment? Of course, that the tree would become even more attractive. And if that was not enough, as if that is not enough, God sends also the serpent, sent by God to deceive Eve. So what was the whole purpose, the hidden purpose, God's hidden, how do you say that? The Greek word is boulema, God's hidden will, so to speak. His hidden purpose was, of course, that the human would eat from that fruit, that forbidden fruit, because there should be knowledge of both good and evil. Remember the name of that tree that God gave? The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Very important. The tree of the knowledge of both good and evil. So let's continue. Yeah, we already are at our limit. Let's continue this story next vlog, so that we can go into this more thoroughly. Thanks again for watching, and see you next time.